Okay, welcome to Isolation Paradise. So after my unboxing and camera comparison of the P40 Pro, Huawei wanted to work with me on a couple of videos to kind of explain to you what it's like to live with a Huawei phone. So I've had my SIM card in the P40 Pro for 2 weeks now. I've been shooting with it, tweeting from it, playing games on it. But you probably don't need telling that Huawei and Google, they aren't allowed to work together in the same way anymore. So as someone who uses Google for literally everything, it's been an interesting experience. Well, for starters, about 5 days after receiving this, the UK went into lockdown, so my time with it's been a little bit different. I haven't taken it to fancy places, we haven't done a lot of travel, but it has given me some really nice one-on-one time with the phone. Gotta stop doing that. The cameras have been continuously surprising. Something you might not know about me is that I love painting. So I've been using this downtime to start one, and this is the phone I chose to take photos of the progress. I tried a few different ones, I just wanted the most reliable camera for it, but as you've probably seen from the comparisons, the P40 Pro takes insanely consistent shots, regardless of the lighting conditions. The other day I was just playing with the cat in like a fairly dimly lit room, and it's just cool that even in low light, it recognized that I was taking photos of a cat, and while I'm not really sure what it did behind the scenes, the end result was surprising to me, because it wasn't a blurred mess. Anyone who owns cats will know that when they're awake, they don't sit still. Or actually, that could just be mine. But the point is, I've struggled to do this in the past. Another example of this camera in a real-life scenario was a couple of days ago. I was just messing around with the zoom in a pretty dim room with harsh backlighting. And because the phone recognized I was capturing text, just check how much the image changes after the processing is applied. This was shot at over 25 times zoom. I had to double take after seeing this. It's almost tough to show you how good the camera is in the dark, because by the time the phone has processed the images, they look bright. And I get it, not everyone likes the idea of having night shots that make the night look brighter than it was, but regardless, I couldn't help but just be impressed by the technology. Like, this photo was taken with a dark night sky above, probably around 11 PM at night. I just pointed the phone up, took a photo, not even a night mode photo, just using auto, and you can still crop in and see the stars. I already showed you in my unboxing what the phone was capable of handheld, but since then, I've been testing what happens when you stick it onto a tripod. Yeah, I mean, these night capabilities are my favorite part of the phone, and I could go on for a while. I'm gonna stop. But okay, the elephant in the room. What about this software situation? Well, one thing I was initially pretty worried about was Gmail. I use Gmail all the time, and it would be a massive faff to have to create new accounts just to use this phone. But your Gmail works, you just gotta use it through Huawei's own mail app, or another email app like Microsoft Outlook. Google Maps is another really important one, and there's a few different workarounds to this, but what I've done is just installed Google Maps Go. It's a web-based application that does basically the same thing. Some people even prefer it over normal Google Maps because it takes up like 100 times less storage. I wouldn't say I'm in that camp of people, but after a few times of using it, I just kind of forgot. It's a tool and it got the job done. The big one, of course, which you're going to notice, is that there's no Play Store here. This is a worry for Huawei fans, people who love Huawei's hardware, but who don't want to give up access to millions of applications, the things that make your smartphone smart. And right now, the best alternatives are Huawei's app gallery and something called Phone Clone. When I was setting this phone up a couple of weeks ago, the Phone Clone app is what I was using, and it transfers all the apps that can work on Huawei. So it's about 80% of the ones that I'm used to using. My Instagram, my Twitter, most of my games, and all those random apps I never got around to deleting. They're here. And then when you want to download more apps on top of that, I'd say Huawei's app gallery is decent right now. It does already have a lot of the more popular apps like Snapchat, TikTok, Microsoft Office and so on, but at the same time there are gaps for the time being. You've probably heard this already though, Huawei is investing very heavily in this app gallery, so from what I've been told, even in a few months' time, this landscape might look completely different. And bear in mind, this is Android. There's 100 ways to get apps. If it's not on Huawei's app gallery, then you can still use third-party app markets, or failing that, go onto Huawei's browser and manually download the APK file. The two things I've really felt the lack of are Netflix, which needs Google services to work, and YouTube, for which it's mobile browser time. Huawei does have their own suite of entertainment apps, Huawei Video and Huawei Music. They're actually surprisingly well populated already. I was just having a flick through Huawei Music the other day, and every song I searched for, it's there, but it is a $9.99 a month subscription for full access. This is not a perfect solution. obviously, but it's a work in progress. You've got to remember that it's been barely a year since Huawei was thrust into this position, and considering the magnitude of trying to build your own entire ecosystem, it's further along than I thought it would be at this stage. But I've had a long chat with Huawei about this, and I'm going to make a separate dedicated video all about the future of this ecosystem, because I think it's fascinating. And now, just a couple of other cool things I've picked up having spent more time with this phone. When flicking through Instagram, I actually found myself really liking Huawei's knuckle gesture system. 2 knocks on the screen will take a screenshot, and then if you actually just draw with your knuckle, you can take specific screenshots with any shape. Kind of an underrated feature. If you think about it, it's like having a stylus for your phone, but your stylus is your knuckle. And then actually, for an even wackier way to take screenshots, voila. It's called GrabShot. It uses the infrared sensors built into the hole punch up front to detect air gestures. And yeah, we've been seeing this kind of stuff for several years now, but it works well enough on this phone that I've actually found myself defaulting to it if I'm sitting in a position where it's a bit of extra effort to knock the screen. Could still be the novelty factor, but this is as good as air gestures have ever been. And the last thing was multi-window. So you have this bar you can summon on the side, and any app you tap here opens up in a floating window, which we've seen before, but the difference here is that it seems to work with pretty much every app, not just apps that have been coded to work with it. So you could be playing a game, and then at the same time looking at a guide on how to get better at it. Or you could even, technically speaking, play 2 games at the same time. So how do I feel about it right now? Well, the best way I could describe my switch to this is similar to how it felt switching from Android to iOS. There's things I obviously wish this had, but at the same time it does offer some things that my past phone didn't. And I'm just holding on to the hope that this ecosystem is improving quickly. Huawei's app gallery has a wishlist button, for example, so users can type an app that they want to be made available. Huawei will then request those developers to port their app over, and if they do, you can set it to auto-install on your phone. You won't even realize it's happening. This kind of stuff is reassuring to me, but I want to save it for a separate video because there's more to it than it initially seems. So for now, thanks a lot for watching. My name is Aaron, this is Mr.
from the top of a glass with surface tension. And the promo material you've probably seen in this phone has it looking like pretty much all screen, but what we've ended up with is this. And it's a good looking screen, but it mostly just seems like everything's rounded off. And of course, the corners don't really get to curve in like that. So you end up with this very unique shape that's not necessarily better. It's like if you imagine trying to wrap a circular gift with wrapping paper and you try to wrap over the entire sphere without creasing anything, like you're gonna end up with some creases in that screen at some point. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but you can see it is still mostly screen, but this isn't something I necessarily copy. Also, you've definitely noticed that huge cutout by now. It's for the selfie camera and a depth sensor and infrared. This is about as small as you can get, actually, a pill-shaped cutout if you want to still have all three of those things. But I think we're finding more and more that the extra depth sensors are not necessarily as useful as we've thought they are. But the infrared in the middle is nice to have for face unlock in low light environments. When I see this, I think of the iPhone and its massive notch, because of course they have all those Face ID sensors. And I'm hoping maybe finally this year we see a much smaller notch in the new iPhone. They seem pretty committed to Face ID and keeping the infrared and all that stuff at the top, but if we're seeing that Huawei can do this pill-shaped cutout being much smaller than a notch, then hopefully Apple can shrink the notch this year too. Then underneath this display is the new optical fingerprint reader, which they say is 30% larger and 30% faster. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, thank you, sweet. On paper, those improvements are great. I've been saying we should get these fingerprint readers like the whole bottom half of the screen, so it's just easy. You don't even have to think about it. But in practice, actually using this one, I can't even really tell if it's actually bigger. In fact, the animation, which you can see where it lights up, is about the same size as last year. And it's fast, which is great, but really getting that sensor larger is the technical challenge here. Plus, I think this one's actually a little higher up on the phone than I would have wanted. But I will still say, I hope other manufacturers copy continuing to work on fitting bigger sensors in these screens. So then, really probably the biggest focus of this new phone is the camera system on the back. What? I know, it's so subtle. Did you even notice it back there? The P40 Pro has a quad camera system. So 50 megapixel main camera with OIS with an absolutely massive 1/1.2 inch sensor, then a 40 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 12 megapixel 5x optical periscope camera you can see over there on the side with that recognizable rectangle, all on the back with the time of flight sensor and a mic and the flash as well. Interestingly, if the Galaxy S20 Ultra didn't exist, I think it would be easy to look at this camera and the numbers and think, oh wow, it looks like Huawei is just playing the numbers game with their camera. They're trying to throw as many of the biggest numbers as possible at us to hopefully equal a good camera. But Huawei's angle is actually almost the exact opposite of that. They said, basically, we don't think we need to go all out with the numbers. We're not hitting 100 here, but we do want to strike a balance between high numbers and actually good performance. Okay. Please copy that. But of course, you can only copy the approach of the camera as far as getting to actual execution. Now, this camera, as far as it translates, it's still early. I've only had this phone for 2 days for my first impressions, but it seems pretty good, usually really good. I've taken a lot of good photos, a lot of sharp photos with this camera. It is binning and spitting out 12 megapixel photos by default. And for the most part, both the standard and the ultra wide are giving me pretty consistent photos, although the ultra wide is still a little bit softer despite its 40 megapixels. But you're also gonna notice from the main camera that huge sensor has some of the same problems as the huge sensor from the S20 Ultra, basically with the plane of focus being so thin that close-up subjects aren't completely in focus and you do start to get some fringing. No autofocus problems though. That Phasitech autofocus in this phone seems rock solid despite the problems the S20 Ultra had. But yeah, overall here, if you look past the numbers, this is a solid camera that reminds me of many Huawei cameras in the past as far as color and high exposure and just the general shot style. Matter of fact, if any of the cameras here impressed me, it was actually the selfie camera with all the beauty modes turned off because it kept a ton of detail. That to me is a really good first impression. The battery in this phone is 4,200 milliamp hours. And if anything, it feels like a bigger battery trend is sort of a wave everyone's hopping on now. Everyone copying that is a good thing. but this one takes it a step further. P40 Pro has 40-watt wired charging and, incredibly, support for 40-watt fast wireless charging, which is awesome. For context, the $1,000 iPhone 11 Pro Max ships with an 18-watt wired fast charger. I don't even know if I have access to a wireless charger that cranks out 40 watts of power, but the second I can, I will try to get my hands on it. But until then, other manufacturers, yes, please copy that. And then the rest of the specs of this phone are pretty high-end, if you were wondering. Not bleeding edge, but the Kirin 990, 8 gigs of RAM, 128 or 256 gigs of storage, IP68 water resistant, 5G enabled, and there are a bunch of other little things it does well. There's software EMUI 10.1. While it is better with every iteration, it's still nowhere near being able to recommend for this market. Yes, they do have Huawei's app gallery and a lot of other familiar features and UI tweaks like, oh, I don't know, swiping down from the home screen to bring up a search box and app suggestions, and a stock weather app that looks not just eerily close, but pretty obviously close to another certain weather app. And even a new voice assistant they're launching called Celia. And you can trigger it by saying, "Hey Celia," which I don't want to say they're copying anyone, but if you say it fast enough, "Hey Celia." So, take what you wish. But really the software, if it was anything amazing or game-changing here, that would be the easiest to tell other manufacturers to copy because they copy software all the time. Seems like Huawei is just already ahead of the game in that department. So overall, my take is P40 Pro is a nice package, and it wouldn't be a bad upgrade for pretty much anyone with a 2 or 3-year-old phone. And while it is missing a couple of the absolute highest end bleeding edge stuff like 8K video or 120 hertz, there is a lot of good stuff in here for the rest of the industry to pick up on, and that's a win for all of us. All right, so to end it, big shout out to this video's sponsor, NordVPN. This one is specifically to help you expand your quarantine content library, because a VPN can let you see websites as if you're visiting from another country or a different region. So a lot of people don't know there's a different version of YouTube for the US and YouTube for UK and YouTube for India. So, pro tip, changing your region or your country with a VPN will not only unlock a whole bunch of YouTube videos that were previously blocked in your country, but will also basically unearth entire new libraries. Like, this is literally true for Netflix. So I didn't realize Doctor Who is only available on Netflix UK. But now that you know about NordVPN, you can watch it from anywhere. You're welcome. Plus all the other privacy and security benefits of a VPN that you've probably already heard me talk about. So if you want 70% off, plus 1 additional month free, and why wouldn't you? You can use promo code MKBHD and get started with NordVPN today. So thanks again for NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Good luck with the rest of your hashtag quarantine content. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Hey, what's up guys? Will here for GSM Arena. Huawei has just released 3 phones, the P40, P40 Pro, and the P40 Pro Plus. We're going to talk today about the P40 Pro, which we've already had for a while. Although it isn't the highest tier model in the roster, the Pro still brings a bunch of high-end features. Let's see what it has to offer in our full review. Looks-wise, the P40 Pro doesn't break the mold, but it's quite fitting for a modern flagship. It's made from glass with a frame of aluminum, and the squared-off corners help it to stand out a bit from competitors. The back is curved, and although the finish is a bit conservative, it's quite sleek and elegant looking. The major feature here is of course the quad camera setup, which takes up a decent amount of real estate. Of course, even though the P40 Pro is made of glass, you should expect it to be relatively durable, and the phone has full IP68 water and dust protection too. Flipping over to the front, we have the P40 Pro's 6.6-inch curved OLED screen. Its resolution is in between Full HD and QHD at 1200 by 2640 pixels, and the display wraps around the edges of the phone. Up at the top, there is a wide punch hole cutout for the selfie cam and TOF sensor. Also note that there isn't a traditional earpiece for calls. Instead, the sound is generated by vibrations of the screen. The P40 Pro is Huawei's first smartphone with a high refresh rate display. At 90Hz, it's not as fast as the 120Hz you see in the Galaxy S20, but it's enough to make moving elements on the screen appear much smoother. Unlike the S20, you don't have to turn down the resolution to enable the high refresh rate. Content looks great, with deep blacks, great contrast, and accurate colors. Max brightness is decent at around 430 nits. You don't get much of a boost in the sun, however. With auto mode on, you'll get up to about 500 nits. The display supports HDR+, however, because of software limitations, you won't be able to get that content via the popular streaming services. Unlocking the phone is done through an optical under-display fingerprint reader. It's larger than before, and among the fastest and most reliable you can get right now. There's also the face unlock option, which is quite secure, thanks to the 3D scan provided by the TOF camera. It works even in the dark. For audio, the P40 Pro has a single bottom firing loudspeaker. We would have preferred a stereo setup, but seeing as how there's no traditional earpiece, maybe it isn't possible here. As far as quality goes, this speaker's loudness is good, and mids and highs sound decent, but the lows are a little lacking.
I'm wide awake, but you're a nightmare.
Of course, if you want to plug in regular 3.5mm headphones, you'll need to use a USB-C adapter here. Now let's get into the P40 Pro's software limitations, since that's the main caveat to worry about when getting this phone. As you might know, US sanctions on Huawei mean that this phone is missing Google's apps and services, which we're accustomed to here in the West. Instead of Google Maps, you'll need to use an alternative, at least until Huawei comes up with its own maps, which it's developing with TomTom. Replacing the Google Assistant on this phone is Huawei's Celia, which will arrive with an OTA update down the line. For now, saying "Hey Celia" merely activates Hi Voice, which provides a few voice-activated functions. To get extra apps, you'll need to use Huawei's proprietary app gallery. Browsing through it, you'll see that it still has a long way to go with the app catalog, but at least they prioritize getting the popular local apps on board. What apps are missing can often be found on third-party app stores such as Amazon's or APK Pure. You may have to check multiple places for a specific app though. This makes for somewhat of a fragmented experience, but it's something you can learn to live with, especially if you're more tech-savvy. There are other options out there too. For example, you can get most of the apps off of your old phone using the Phone Clone app, but since Google services aren't supported, some might not even work properly. And for those that do work, to keep them updated, you'll still need to rely on the third-party stores. Besides all that though, the phone's interface works well. It's Huawei's EMUI 10.1 based on Android 10, and everything feels smooth and snappy. There aren't really any surprises here. One feature we do like to see is an IR blaster, which allows the P40 Pro to control certain appliances. Pretty convenient. Storage on the P40 Pro is pretty generous, with 256 gigs on board. It is expandable too, but you'd have to use one of Huawei's proprietary nano memory cards. Under the hood of the P40 Pro is a flagship-grade Kirin 990 5G chipset. Compared to the regular Kirin 990, this one has a bit faster processor and, well, that faster 5G connectivity. In CPU benchmarks, the P40 Pro does an excellent job, scoring at the top of the charts as far as Android phones go. GPU-wise, it's not quite at the top, but still flagship-worthy. You should expect awesome gaming performance here, especially since the phone does a great job in managing its thermals. As far as battery life goes, the P40 Pro doesn't disappoint either. It packs a 4200 mAh battery and scored an endurance rating of 94 hours in our proprietary battery tests, regardless of screen refresh rate. Charging speed is quite impressive. The phone comes bundled with a 40-watt charger, and with it we were able to charge the battery from 0 to 80% in just half an hour. There's also support for 27-watt fast wireless charging, and reverse wireless charging through which the phone can charge another device. Now let's move on to the cameras. The P40 Pro's quad camera setup consists of a 50-megapixel main camera, a 40-megapixel ultra-wide cam, a 12-megapixel 5x periscope zoom lens, and a TOF camera. We're going to do a short overview of the P40 Pro's camera quality here in this video, and we'll have a separate camera review if you want to learn even more. Shots from the main cam come out in 12.5 megapixels, as 4 pixels are combined into one. In daylight, these look excellent, every bit as flagship grade as you'd expect. In fact, during the day, this high quality is preserved across the main, telephoto, and ultra-wide cameras. We're really impressed, especially by the ultra-wide camera. Another category in which the P40 Pro excels is portraits, thanks to the TOF camera. These are among the best we've seen from a smartphone. In low light, the P40 Pro continues to impress from both the main and the ultra-wide cameras. Even without night mode on, these shots really set the bar for what's achievable by a phone at night. In fact, enabling night mode for these actually results in a lower quality, though brighter result. Photos taken with the 5x nighttime zoom are good in quality too, but if you're able to keep the phone stable enough for a few seconds, night mode works wonders in improving the output. Let's not forget selfies. They have excellent quality and are quite consistent thanks to autofocus. As far as video goes, 4K at 30 FPS is great, from all three rear cameras. Detail leaves a bit more to be desired, and maybe that's due to the always-on stabilization. This stabilization does work quite well though, and it achieves this smoothness not through just EIS, but some AI processing as well. So that's the Huawei P40 Pro. It really brings basically everything you'd want from a flagship device these days. A good-looking waterproof build, a high refresh rate OLED screen, an awesome chipset, good battery life with fast charging, and some of the best cameras around. The only features I really miss here are stereo speakers, and of course Google services. It is possible to get most of the apps you want up and running, but it's a hassle, and keeping them updated isn't so straightforward. And there are some apps which will never run on this device at all, since they rely on Google services in order to work. If you don't mind making those trade-offs though, then the P40 Pro is worth recommending, as basically everything else about it is awesome. Let's hope that as Huawei's app gallery expands, the software situation for the new Huawei phones gets a bit easier to live with. Thanks for watching guys, stay safe and see you on the next one.
Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and I've been using the new Huawei P40 Pro for the past couple of weeks. And I've had loads of questions from you guys on Twitter and Instagram asking about the app situation, how good are the cameras, do I have any tips? So when Huawei reached out asking if they could sponsor a video, I thought this would be a great opportunity to give you guys my experiences so far, while also giving you a few tips on how to get the most out of it. So by now you've probably seen a whole bunch of videos on the P40 Pro, but I just want to start by emphasizing how much I really appreciate the design of this thing. Now I know that the pill-shaped hole punch cutout is a little bit on the chunky side, and we'll come back to that in a second, but the frost silver model I have here with this matte glass finish looks awesome, and there's not a smudge or fingerprint in sight. I also love the fact that with this overflow design, where the glass screen curves over all four edges, which apparently is inspired by the surface tension of water in a full glass, that the screen itself doesn't actually curve that much. It's mainly just the glass. And I know a lot of people prefer flat displays as there's less risk of accidentally pressing it with your hand. So we're kind of getting the best of both worlds here. The hole punch, I must admit, was a little bit distracting at first, but you do quickly forget about it. And in fact, when watching video, it's usually covered up anyway, and in games, my thumb is over the top of it, so it's not really a big deal. But the advantage is that along with the 32 megapixel selfie camera, we also get an infrared sensor, which I'm so glad they included because I tend to rely on face unlocking. Although we do also have an optical fingerprint reader, but with most phones, when it gets dark, it takes forever to recognize you, or it has to blast the screen brightness up. This works instantly in any condition. My only feedback is that I wish it had stereo speakers. We just have this single one at the bottom, which does sound good, but unless you're wearing headphones, when you say, playing games, or watching videos, it can sometimes sound a little bit one-sided. As for the earpiece speaker, well, you can't actually see it because it's under the screen. It's using an acoustic display which actually vibrates to give you the sound for calls. It does sound good, but unfortunately you can't use it for anything else. So the P40 Pro has a whole bunch of upgrades, from the Kirin 995G chip, the refreshed design, the camera upgrades, but I think one of the first things you'll notice is this new, much smoother 90Hz refresh rate. It just makes everything feel faster, and together with the AMOLED panel, HDR10 support, and P3 color, DisplayMate actually gave it an A+, which is their highest score. It's a beautiful screen. Now on paper, 90Hz and a full HD Plus resolution isn't exactly flagship. There are other phones out there with 120Hz, even 144Hz, and of course Quad HD Plus resolutions. But you know what? I think Huawei have made the right choice here. They've balanced sharpness, smoothness, and also battery life. And paired with the 4200 mAh cell, over the past couple of weeks, I've been averaging about 8 hours of screen on time. Now, to be fair, real world use is a little bit different right now under lockdown. But I'm still watching YouTube videos, listening to Spotify, playing the odd game, and spending far too much time on socials and chatting to friends online. So for example, at 8:30 AM, we're at 100%. By 2 PM, it's on about 83%. And then at around 10 PM, it's still on 37%. And that's after a pretty intensive day of testing. Huawei phones, whatever you may think of them, consistently offer fantastic battery life. And it gets better over time as the AI learns your usage patterns. And then along with the 40-watt supercharging, which will get you from 0 to 80% in just half an hour, 27-watt fast wireless charging, although it's not the super fast 40 watts on the Pro Plus model, and also now we get twice as fast 7.5-watt reverse wireless charging for topping up other devices. So you've got a lot of options. So far, so good then, but what about the app situation? What's it actually like to live with? Well, the truth is, it is a different experience. But if you come into this with an open mind and you're willing to try different versions of apps, and you use a couple of workarounds, I've got most of the apps that I want. As I mentioned in my unboxing video, the first thing you want to do when setting this up is clone the apps from your old phone. This is one of the best ways to get most of your current apps onto the P40 Pro. You can do it from any Android or iPhone, just download the phone clone app. It doesn't transfer everything though, but it is a good start. The next step is to check out Huawei's app gallery. And they've got some pretty big apps in there already, from Microsoft Office, Outlook, and Amazon Shopping, to Snapchat, TikTok, and games like Asphalt 9 and World of Tanks. But Huawei's investing $1 billion into getting developers to bring their apps over. So there is a lot of potential here, but it will take time. Right now, Huawei's official recommendation is to use the app gallery and phone clone to get the apps you want. But of course, there are third-party app stores out there that can help plug the gap of any apps that you can't otherwise find. And in many cases, you can actually download the apps directly from the company's website. So as I say, I have most of the apps that I want, but there are a few missing, like Uber, Lyft, Netflix, and YouTube. For the latter two though, I found the best way is actually just creating a web shortcut on the home screen. It's not as well optimized as a dedicated app, but it works pretty well. The thing is, by buying this phone, you are sort of investing in the Huawei ecosystem. So life is much easier if you're happy to adopt their apps. All the essentials you'd expect on a regular phone are here, from video and music to podcasts and fitness. I actually really like their fitness app, and I've been using it a lot to keep track of my home workouts. And it's not just the apps either. Huawei's EMUI 10.1 software is genuinely really nice to use. We've got built-in dark mode, dynamic wallpapers, you can put apps in pop-out windows for multitasking, or even use air gestures if your hands are dirty while cooking and trying to read a recipe. They've even added their own voice assistant called Celia.
It won't be rainy in London. It will be mostly sunny with a high of 18 degrees Celsius.
And speaking of the Huawei ecosystem, if you've got one of their MateBook laptops, you can actually check my reviews of this latest MateBook D15, which I posted a few weeks ago. You can simply tap the P40 Pro to pair them, and then use Huawei Share to transfer files, or even the new multi-collab feature where you can effectively use your phone on the laptop. It's pretty nifty. So yes, there's definitely a transition moving to the P40 Pro, but if you're willing to give it a chance, I think you'll find it's better than you expected. Alright, so enough about apps, let's talk about that camera. These are the specs, but the headline is the new much bigger 50 megapixel RYYB sensor. Just a quick thought before we start talking about camera stuff, because in the crazy world that we live in, you can see my hometown's high street is completely deserted because people are doing the right thing and staying at home. But I tend to go for an hour walk a day as part of my one daily dose of allowed exercise, and so I'm just bringing the phones with me and taking some photos along the way. Going out to do camera comparisons is not essential, but I'm just tying it in with some exercise. So yeah, stay safe, guys. As for selfie video, well, we can now shoot in 4K 60. Previously, it was limited to 1080, so a nice boost in resolution. We also now get autofocus for the first time on a Huawei flagship, which, well, hopefully that's demonstrating it. But yeah, it looks pretty good. And along with the 3 microphones built in, hopefully you can hear me reasonably well. The wind noise isn't being picked up too much. And also, as the sun's beating down on me, it's dealing with the bright highlights of one side and the shadows of the other reasonably well. So this is 4K 30 video from the rear camera, and it's kind of crazy what a ghost town everywhere has become. Although obviously it's good that people are staying at home. So video quality is good, and it's using AIS and OIS for video stabilization, although you can still see some judder from my footsteps. And along with a 5x optical telephoto lens, an ultra-wide lens, and a time-of-flight depth sensor, the P40 Pro offers an incredible camera setup. Now for me, I usually turn the beauty enhancements off, but I leave the AI Master enabled as it optimizes the photo based on scene and object recognition. So these are a few shots I've taken over the past week, and you can see that zooming in even up to 10 times is very impressive, although the 50 times digital zoom maybe pushes it a bit too far. but the P40 Pro really stands out in low light. In fact, while it has a dedicated night mode for longer exposure, I only really used this when it was completely dark. Most of the time, the standard photo mode did a great job in low light. And I think one of the best, and definitely less talked about upgrades, is the improved white balance sensor. The P40 Pro managed to offer realistic colors, even in difficult lighting. And then around the front, we have a 32 megapixel selfie camera. It also uses the new IR sensor to help with depth for more realistic portrait shots. So far, I've been really impressed with the P40 Pro's camera, but there's so much to talk about here, I want to save that for a proper deep dive video where I go into more detail. Although I do just want to show you this. It's straight out of the P40 Pro. No edits, no night mode, and not even a tripod, I'm just holding this. I'm ridiculously impressed by how good the moon looks in these shots. So it's been a fun couple of weeks of using the P40 Pro so far, and while it has been a challenge in some respects, it's also been a bit of a wake-up call that maybe we shouldn't all be so dependent on Google's suite of apps. Who's to say that they're the best ones? I mean, in China, the Middle East, and many parts of Asia, their home screens and app drawers would look totally different to ours. But I feel like I've got a good halfway house here, I've got pretty much all the apps that I want, and I'm also using some new ones. It's exciting to see a proper challenger to the App Store and the Play Store. So I'm going to keep using this for a while, and I've also teamed up with Huawei to offer you guys an exclusive discount, so you can get £129.99 off the P40 Pro and FreeBuds 3 bundle. Just follow the link in the description and use the code ATechChap. The Tech Chap would have made more sense, but there you go, ATechChap, like there's more than one of me. But what do you make of the P40 Pro? Would you be tempted to buy it? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video and hit that subscribe button below if you want to see more from me, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.